Last week we held our last session for our Explore and Connect class. It's a class for newcomers at UCS. It's such an amazing circle of people. I just have to tell you, it's so wonderful to be able to sit with them and hear their stories. And I am always really just inspired by their stories. Their very different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, their religious backgrounds. It's amazing to me. I almost want to just put down the things that we're supposed to talk about and listen to them and listen to the lessons they've learned in life. In that last session, we begin our conversation by answering two questions. What did you come to UCS seeking? And what have you found here that surprises you? It's the answers to this second question, what you found that surprised you, that stuck with me. For so many of us, our answer is, what surprises me is that I am going to church and that I love it, right? I must admit that this is also true for me, and I know I've told you this story, but every now and again I have to answer the question what I do for a living. There's always this long pause as I consider my options. I'm a minister, I say. And then I have to physically stop myself from saying, but I'm not that kind of minister. What I mean is I'm a normal person. I'm married, I swear, I don't always pray at dinner. In fact, I hardly ever pray at dinner. I'm not fanatical, definitely. And if your child has a play date with mine, I promise I won't indoctrinate them. I always feel compelled to define my profession and my religion in contrast to those religious people who get all of the attention, the extremists. I don't, but I feel compelled to. And I know based on my conversations with so many of you that I'm not alone in feeling that urge to explain what it means. People share with me all of the time their stories of their first time that they came out of the closet to their friends as actually going to church or going to worship or teaching religious education on Sunday mornings or going to your first Spirit and Practice circle or joining an actual congregation. I know that you felt like you needed to explain, but it's not that. Likewise, last month I was at an interfaith meeting with lots of clergy, and one of the Lutheran pastors and I were talking about the Starbucks red cup debacle. I'd been in Transylvania, so I'd missed the news, and he was bringing me up to speed. The pastor turned to me and said, I mean, come on, Christians, right? What am I going to do? And I looked at him. This is a Lutheran pastor whom I've never seen not wearing his collar, and said, but you're Christian. And he said, but I'm not that kind of Christian. So it's not just us. It's not just us. The same can be said for Muslims, especially this month, especially in light of what's going on in our world. In his New York Times column, Nick Kristof shared the post that went viral on Twitter from a young British man, Kash Ali. He said, or he wrote, I don't understand why non-Muslims think we British Muslims can stop ISIS. Mate, I can't even get a text back from the girl I like, and you expect me to stop a terrorist organization? Come on. For those of us who might be the first to sing John Lennon's verse, Imagine There's No Religion, as the way to end violence in our world, how do we express the fact that all of us are sitting here right now? How do we express our need to find meaning in our lives, or our desire to teach our children shared values? How do we share with others our longing to be in communities that are built on shared principles and mutual care? How do we reconcile what we're finding and loving in religion? Because when it comes to religion, we are in danger of what Chimamanda Adichie calls the single story. She describes it as showing a people as only one thing over and over again until that is what they become. When we think of religious people in our time, all of our characters tend toward one story. They may look very different in appearance. Nevertheless, religious people in this single story possess similar ways of being. They are fanatical, you might say. They only behave in one way. They think everyone else should behave that way too. They are literal in their readings of the scripture and of law. They are violent to outsiders and non-believers and often women. They are power hungry and engaged in a shouting match where the loudest is the winner. This single story has become so much a part of our society's message about religion that if you are religious at all, you are equated with being like them. My colleague, the Reverend Bob Morris, a man who founded an organization here in Summit on interreligious dialogue and learning, reminds me regularly that the voice of religion most articulated in the media is the loudest and the most violent. The religious extremists, and in this country mostly Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, are the ones who get to brand religion. So words like church and temple and mosque become synonymous with violence, corruption, bureaucracy, oppression, and abuse. Thus, our congregation's decades-long tension with whether our name, the Unitarian Church in Summit, is radically inclusive or not. Or if, in fact, we as Unitarian Universalists are even a religion. According to Chimamanda Adichie, telling a single story about religion flattens the experience of religion. So that if you are religious, that single story says you can only be one thing: violent, oppressive, fanatical. But in her life, she did not know that people like her could exist in literature. Reading one type of story over and over again flattened her experience of what books could hold. Her conclusion was that her own story could never be told in a book. Likewise, many of us have lost sight of the fact that people like us could exist in religion. How many of you, when you found Unitarian Universalism, said, "There's actually a community for us? I wish I had known about this so many years ago. I can't tell you, I wanted to be a minister since the time I was 10. How was I going to be a minister if I didn't know if I believed in God?" We're out there. This community exists. But if you don't know that, then you have to say, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. We often say that we're culturally Catholic or culturally Jewish, but not religiously so. We say that we're secular. We just happen to be members of a community. On a normal day in America, this may not matter a whole lot, whether you call yourself religious or not. We religious moderates and liberals, for that's kind of what we are, we can just roll our eyes at Christian extremists who want the Starbucks cups to say Merry Christmas. Whatever. It's a cup, right? But these aren't normal days. When terrorism in the name of religion is an everyday occurrence around our globe, it is not a normal day, and much is at stake. Much more than a cup. And the truth is that maybe they haven't ever been normal days. Maybe this has just been going on for a long time and we're just waking up to it again. The religious scholar Reza Aslan, and I want you all to read Reza Aslan as much as you can. The religious scholar Aslan says that we shouldn't be surprised. He says that from their beginnings, all religions have had individual voices trying to define the nature of religion, and that these voices create a pendulum in which there are two extremes and a whole lot of voices in the middle. And on one side, people say that religion is about peace and love and compassion for others. And on another side, there are the voices that say there is one truth and it must dominate all other truths. And again, many voices in between. Reza Aslan says that each new generation must learn how to give voice to the multiplicity of understandings that religion holds, so that religion is never flattened into a single story of experience. My question in recent weeks has been, where is our voice as religious people in this time? Where is our story of religion, of showing up to this place and loving it? Where is the voice of compassion and justice? Where is the voice of welcoming the stranger and curiosity into what is really going on? But I fear that the world won't hear our stories of religion because we don't want to be associated with the fanatics and the violence and the oppression. And therefore we abandon it, and we cede our ground to the extremists. This single story is robbing us of our voice, and it's a voice that is much needed in this time. Chimamanda Adichie says that the unintended consequence of only reading one story was that she didn't know that people like her could exist in literature. She said discovering African writers saved her from having a single story of what books are. I wonder what the unintended consequences are if we, as religious moderates and liberals, or whatever we are becoming, stay silent, if we abandon religion. I wonder what healing our voices could offer the world in this time. And of course, I come back to that Explore and Connect class, listening to those stories of people who are coming through our doors, stories of many different types of religions coming together. And so I wonder what would happen if we began articulating our stories as religious people, to show the world the depth that religion contains. I think we might find that there are far more voices like ours, and we might find them across many different religions. Yesterday, one member sent me a screenshot of a joke. Many of you might have gotten it, at least at first service they had. It says, a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, a pagan, and an atheist all walk into a coffee shop. And they talk, laugh, drink coffee, and become good friends. This is not a joke. His comment to me, the world needs to start learning how to do this. The world needs the single story of religion to change by adding our stories to it. And probably the hardest thing about the single story is that it has robbed us of our human connection. Adichie says that the danger of the single story is that it robs people of dignity, and it stops them from recognizing our equal humanity. In her case, Adichie was only able to see her houseboy Fide as poor. Poverty became her single story of him and his family. I'm sure that we could see that last week as we sat with Home First families, how we might have seen them through the lens of poverty, but suddenly sitting and talking with them about simple everyday things, we saw that there was much more to them. When Adichie then went to university in America, as you saw, the tables were turned and her roommate could only see her through her single story of Africans. She said, in this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to my American roommate in any way. No possibility of feelings more complex than pity. No possibility of connection as human equals. And the only reason that Adichie might have been able to articulate and identify with her roommate is because she had experienced those same emotions and that same single-mindedness with her houseboy Fide. The single story emphasizes only our distance from and our difference between each other. Between Adichie and Fide. Between Adichie and her roommate. Between us as religious people. We can't connect as human beings. We cannot see ourselves in one another. And so I've been wondering about these religious people that we keep talking about, the ones on the extremes. And I wonder about our single story of them. You know, the one that I said earlier, the one that we think about? I'm sure that I'm being single-minded in just talking about them. But the one where we say that they're fanatical and crazy, violent and power-hungry. After the events in Paris and Beirut, I heard many people share their instantaneous reactions. One, feelings of profound anger, feelings of life-changing fear. When I told people that I was going to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York, people across the board said, "Are you not too terrified to go?" And I said, "I don't care. I've got to go. I can't let it stop my life." But that was the reaction. It's part of where we've been living. And so I've heard people say about religious extremists that they're crazy or that they're evil. Let's bomb them and rid our world of this evil. And I have to say that I can identify with this reaction and the feeling wholeheartedly. There are moments when I am there. But then I have to ask myself, as a religious person and as a Unitarian Universalist, how am I called to react? How am I called to see this situation? And how is the single story endangering my opinion in this moment? You might have seen this. I bought this block of wood with this precept on it when I became a mother. It says, "Love me when I least deserve it, because that's when I need it the most." This precept has served me well, not only with my children, but with human beings in general. It tends to show up in my life like this. I ask my child to put her shoes on as we're getting ready for the bus. And you should know in my household, when we get ready for the bus, we're always 5 minutes behind. She blows up at me about getting her shoes on. And her reaction, because we're getting our shoes on all the time, her reaction seems unnecessarily angry to me. Most of the time I react. And I match her intensity with my own intensity, because the bus is leaving. And it doesn't end well, and both of us carry it throughout the day. Sometimes, however, I have the presence to remember this precept, and I sit down next to her, and I put my hand on her back, and I say, "Are you okay? Are you doing all right? What's going on?" Sometimes she has no words for me, and she'll just lean into me in a way that says, "I'm hurting." But more often, a full-fledged story emerges, and I find out that she's feeling low, or that she feels like she doesn't belong, or she's feeling invisible. And there's this story there that was so much more than shoes. Now I know that it seems a far leap to go from parenting to being with religious extremists. I know that. But this precept was the first thing to enter my mind after the attacks in Paris and Beirut. What hurting in our world has caused these attacks to occur? And what are the stories that brought us to this point? How is my single story about religious extremists stopping me from hearing the story that lies underneath? And how is that single story stopping us from creating a human connection? My religious response is always pay attention. Pay attention to the dangers of the single story, because there's always more than meets the eye. Now, I will tell you, I do not have all the answers to this. And I will also tell you that you will leave here today saying, but what do I say about religious extremists? And here's what my answer is. We are going to have to live being uncomfortable as we search for these answers. In your orders of service, we've put a practice. I invite you this week, as you read the news, as you watch a story, as you move into figuring out what this is all about, I invite you to ask yourself, what is the single story that I'm hearing? And how could this story be told in a different way? Just begin there. And then ask yourself, and what is my voice as a religious person in the midst of this? Let's begin there and see where it takes us. Chimamanda Adichie says, when we reject the single story, we regain a kind of paradise. And I think that that's what John Lennon was asking for. Imagine something that is different than where it is now. And let us try to live there.